How tall are you? Your answer to this question tells a detailed story about your past. Not just your personal past and your development through life, but also your distant genetic past through the lives of your ancestors as they evolved over the course of thousands of years. Today, the Netherlands is the tallest country in the world with an average male height of 6 foot or 184 centimeters. This dwarfs the average human male height of 5'7" or 170 centimeters by an 8.2% difference and a staggering 15% difference compared to the men in Timor-Leste, the shortest country in the world with an average adult male height of 5'3" or 160 centimeters. And uncoincidentally, it's not just the Dutch, but their neighboring countries throughout Northern Europe as a whole that are outliers against the global average. But as we look southbound, we see that average height almost perfectly and uniformly decreases the farther latitudinally south we move. And what's even more remarkable is that this phenomenon isn't just confined to Europe, but most of the world. From Asia to North America, the North always seems to be home to taller people. What exactly is going on here, and what allows Northerners to mog the rest of the world so handedly? Is it diet, climate, lifestyle, or is it simply genetics? Well, let's talk about it. My entire family went nuts when I shared this story with them. I always wanted to know how MyHeritage helped determine my height, so I was genuinely excited to sign up with the sponsor of this video, MyHeritage. This thing at MyHeritage is truly a game changer. Discovering your own family history is easy. It all starts with a magic 7. Simply fill in your own info, your parents, and your 4 grandparents. 7 key people, and MyHeritage does all the rest. And maybe their coolest feature? Instant discoveries. With just one click, MyHeritage automatically finds and adds entire branches of your family tree. Like, look how quickly an entire new tree of my in-laws family gets populated. The amount of detailed data is endless. Using over 36 billion historical records, family trees, and even DNA testing, you can trace your ancestry across centuries and continents. And my results way surpass my expectations. I found extended relatives and ancestors scattered throughout the world. Like, check this. I have an entire extended branch of family in Canada that no one in my immediate family had ever even heard of, with MyHeritage finding a distant aunt and uncle's engagement announcement in the local Ottawa newspaper from back in 1968. But the absolute coolest part was being able to trace my lineage back to China, with notable ancestors like this famous poet, who turns out to be my great-great-uncle. He had a drama-filled life, from being a professor at China's most prestigious university to meeting an untimely demise during the overthrow of the Qing dynasty. My entire family went nuts when I shared this story with them. They also have a ton of cool features like photo enhancing, colorization, and even AI photo animation that brings still images of your ancestors back to life. So if you've been curious about your ancestry, get an exclusive 14-day free trial to MyHeritage using the link in the description below or through the QR code on the screen. To start, let's clarify that while being from northerly latitudes generally means taller average height, we're referring to taller averages within their own geographical subgroups, not compared to the global population. As an example, let's look at Native Americans. Indigenous Peruvians who live near the equator have an average male height of 5'5", while certain populations from North America, like the Northern Cheyenne tribes, who trace their ancestry to the Great Lakes region of Minnesota, have an average male height of around 5'10", a considerable difference. However, these taller populations of northern Native Americans are still shorter than the tallest average-heighted European subgroups. The same applies to East Asia. While Northerners tend to be taller than Southerners, the tallest Asian groups are still on average shorter than the tallest European groups, and actually similar in height to Southern Europeans. Why is this? By far the most important determining factor is climate. Colder regions tend to be home to taller people, but maybe not in the way that you might think. Contrary to some historical beliefs that colder climates directly make people taller, in actuality, climate doesn't genetically shrink or genetically stretch people, but rather indirectly affects diet and lifestyle, which ultimately affects genetics through cross-generational pressures that occur over centuries or even millennia. But for the sake of this section of the video, we'll just start by going over the short-term effects. The closer you are towards the equator, the hotter and more humid the climate becomes. This leads to higher pathogen loads in the form of parasites, gastrointestinal infections, and mosquito-borne diseases. And fighting infections diverts calories away from growth. Children in high pathogen environments tend to grow more slowly and reach lower adult heights. Tropical climates also historically lead to lower storage reliability due to food spoilage, meaning generally less available access to consistent nutrients. Climate affects ecology. Ecology affects nutrition and disease. Nutrition and disease affects childhood growth. Childhood growth affects adult height. As we'll find out by the end of this video, all factors in one way or another tie back to climate. Next, let's take a look at diet, which is also a product of climate, determining what fauna and flora is present in an environment. Nutrition absolutely plays the biggest role in determining an individual's ability to reach their maximum potential adult height. If you're malnourished throughout childhood, regardless of your genetic background, your chances of becoming tall by adulthood are slim. A perfect example to support this theory is in North Korea, which sits in Northeast Asia, an area known for being home to the tallest populations in East Asia. The hermit nation shares nearly identical genetic heritage and material culture to their southern neighbor South Korea, and to a lesser extent, even their northern neighbors, the Chinese provinces of Liaoning, Jilin, and Heilongjiang, regions that shared overlapping territories with historical Korean and Manchurian dynasties throughout history. So you would think these regions would have similar average heights, and they seemingly do, with Heilongjiang and Jilin having an average male height of 5'10" or 178 centimeters, and Liaoning, Shandong, and South Korea just shy of that at 5'9" or 175 centimeters. However, we see an astonishing deviation in North Korea's numbers, with their average male height at 5'5" or 165 centimeters. A dramatic discrepancy in height if we were to have an average North Korean male standing sandwiched between their northern and southern counterparts. The primary cause of this is widespread malnutrition. Over 60% of North Korea's population is estimated to be living in abject poverty, driven by massive military spending, poor governance, and a centrally planned economy that stifles private enterprise. North Korea's GDP per capita is estimated to be somewhere between $700 to $2,000, ranking it near the bottom globally, preventing a significant percentage of their population from accessing adequate healthcare and nutrition. The Indian population is also another case in point. Indian children, when born and raised in the UK, grow on average 4 to 6 centimeters taller than those born in India. This is attributed to a significantly higher standard of living in terms of nutrition and healthcare in the UK compared to India. However, in recent years, the height gap has been gradually shrinking as India continues developing year after year. We can see another interesting example of the effects of nutrition on average height if we observe sexual dimorphism data, or the physiological differences between males and females from certain regions of sub-Saharan Africa, where malnutrition is prevalent. On a global average, adult males are around 7% taller than their female counterparts. However, in poorer regions like Rwanda, men average 162.67 centimeters and women about 158.73 centimeters, a difference of just under 4 centimeters, around an inch and a half, or a difference of only 2.5%, the lowest in the world. This is likely due to the fact that boys are more vulnerable to environmental and nutritional stress, like stunting from malnutrition or chronic infections during early development compared to girls. In populations experiencing widespread deprivation, males' potential for height is disproportionately affected, bringing their average height closer to that of females. In contrast, the Dinaric Alps region of Serbia has the greatest height ratio gap between men and women in the world at 8.7%, 184 centimeters for men and 170 centimeters for women. This is due to the boys in the region having better access to nutrients in adolescence compared to places like Rwanda, allowing them to better achieve their maximum height potential, in combination with more pronounced inequalities in gender roles, where boys are generally more encouraged, while girls are generally discouraged from engaging in physical activities, which studies show also plays a role in affecting an individual's potential for reaching maximum potential height. We'll touch more on the effects of non-dietary lifestyle factors later. So what is the science behind the correlation between nutrition and height? Eating a balanced diet with a variety of foods from different groups increases an individual's maximum absorption of nutrients, especially protein, which is critical for reaching full height potential during childhood, as it supports the growth and development of bones, muscles, and tissues. This is perhaps most exemplified by looking at average historical heights of populations throughout the modern era, where for the past 3 centuries, nearly all populations around the world have seen consistent increases in average heights in tandem with advancements in health and nutrition. And it just so happens that on a global average, regions in the north tend to be wealthier and higher on the Human Development Index than the south, meaning northern populations also tend to have better access to nutrition and healthcare. However, the effects of northern versus southern diets and its impact on average height extends far beyond the modern era. Northern regions are generally colder, with less year-round sunlight, meaning less fertile lands for widespread intensive agriculture. From Scandinavia to the Eurasian steppe, Northerners historically tended to rely less on grains, fruits, and vegetables in their diets compared to their contemporary southern counterparts, and more on livestock, seafood, and dairy. This meant that Northerners were forced to consume higher protein diets, which may have played a role in increasing overall height in the north. And studies show that the quality of protein may matter more than the quantity of protein. Animal protein, especially dairy and meat, is more effective at stimulating childhood growth than plant protein. And what's even more striking about the studies is that dairy seems to have a stronger effect than meat on linear height growth due to the presence of casein and whey, which increases IGF-1, a hormone strongly linked to height growth. This may have been a major contributor in allowing European populations, who historically consumed the most dairy, to consistently take the top rankings on height charts. Now for the big one, genetics, which again, like the others, ties back to climate, but this time through selective advantage. Warm-blooded land animals tend to be larger in colder, more northerly regions, and in the case of humans, this translates to taller heights. This is known as Bergmann's rule, an ecological principle stating that within a species range, body size tends to increase in colder climates and decrease in warmer climates. This is because larger body size helps animals, particularly mammals and birds, retain heat more efficiently due to lower surface area to volume ratio. So it became advantageous for humans to be larger in colder regions. Conversely, smaller body size and warmer climates facilitates heat dissipation through a greater surface area relative to volume. A great example of this can be seen when comparing different species of penguins. Antarctic emperor penguins, the penguin species that lives farthest away from the equator, are some of the largest birds in the world, with bodies adapted to preserve heat in their extreme environment, while the Galapagos penguin, the species that lives closest to the equator, is about 10 to 15 times smaller than the emperor, allowing it to dissipate heat more easily in its warmer environment. Penguins are also a great example as to why, while it's true people are taller in the north versus south phenomenon is but a product of climate. Colder regions towards the poles pressured humans to grow taller. Those that were taller had a higher rate of survival. It just so happens that the majority of the habitable land area of Earth happens to be in the north. However, even with the limited land area of the high latitude regions of the southern hemisphere, we can see some small examples supporting Bergmann's rule in humans. The Tehuelche of Patagonia, of modern-day Chile and Argentina, for example, had an average male height of around 6 foot tall, or 180 centimeters, at the time of first contact, which was significantly taller than the early European explorers they encountered. This led to explorers bringing back exaggerated tales to Europe, like early reports from Magellan's expedition, describing the local people of Patagonia as giants, reaching up to 10 feet tall. Interesting side note, cold-blooded land-dwelling animal body sizes act inversely to those of mammals and birds. The closer to the equator and the warmer the environment, the larger insects and reptiles tend to grow because they rely more heavily on sunlight and ambient temperature to regulate their internal body temperatures. For example, the largest snakes in the world, like the anaconda, live in equatorial regions like the Amazon. Now let's try to throw some wrenches in Bergmann's theory, because there are many. Environmental factors can often supersede climate, especially on islands. The theory holds true in tropical Southeast Asia, where average height is below the global average at around 5'5". However, when we start looking eastbound at the Polynesian islands, height increases significantly, with Tongans and native Hawaiians, for example, averaging around 5'10" or 178 centimeters, well above the global average, despite living in low-latitude tropical climates. Theories suggest that the taller, more muscular body type of Pacific Islanders developed as an adaptation to the relative isolation of their respective island chains. With no major landmasses for hundreds of miles in every direction, ancestral conditions like long sea voyages and times of limited resources required resilience and the ability to store energy efficiently, which was advantageous when food was scarce due to floods or droughts, pressuring humans to grow taller. Another fascinating hole in Bergmann's theory is the island of Japan. The island nation sits parallel to northern China and South Korea, which is home to the tallest people of East Asia, and yet their average height is considerably shorter at 5'7" or 170 centimeters, which aligns more closely with southern Chinese populations. But unlike North Korea, Japan isn't lacking in nutrition and healthcare. On the contrary, it actually ranks extremely high on the Human Development Index. So what's going on here? Well, in Japan's case, we find that ancient genetics can actually supersede diet and environment. Unlike Korea and northern China, Japan had an ancient indigenous hunter-gatherer population of people called the Jomon that were genetically very distant from the rest of Northeast Asia's populations that inhabited the Japanese archipelago since as early as 14,000 BC. The Jomon were eventually displaced or assimilated by the Yayoi, an East Asian culture that migrated to Japan mainly via the Korean peninsula beginning in the first millennium BC. However, despite the seeming absence of Jomon culture today, Japan's isolation from mainland Asia caused a genetic bottleneck, and modern Japanese people now carry on average about 10 to 20% Jomon genetic ancestry. Today, the northernmost island of Japan, Hokkaido, is still home to a significant population of self-identifying Ainu, the direct descendants of the Jomon. This admixture in the Japanese gene pool affected the average height of the nation, as the Jomon were historically shorter than adjacent populations from Korea and northeast China. It's estimated that average adult male height during the late Jomon period was approximately 5'2" or 157 centimeters, while their contemporary male counterparts of the Qin dynasty in northern China were approximately 5'6" or 167 centimeters. Another exception to Bergmann's theory is in certain African populations, a notable example being the Dinka, a Nilotic sub-ethnic group of South Sudan. Despite sitting at only 7 degrees north latitude, this group is a unique outlier in sub-Saharan Africa, with adult males averaging about 6 foot tall or 183 centimeters. This is likely due to the Dinka traditionally relying on pastoralism, with a strong emphasis on cattle herding, which provided an active lifestyle and diets rich in protein, especially in the form of dairy. In addition, they historically were persistence hunters, an ancestral hunting strategy of chasing prey over long distances on the vast plains of Sudan, which may have favored the selection of taller, leaner bodies, a trait likely passed down through generations. Some theories also propose that longer limbs may have evolved in their gene pool to help with heat dissipation by sweating more efficiently. Conversely, northerly latitudes are not exclusive to only tall populations either. The Inuit, for example, are natives to the highest latitude habitable lands in the world, and yet their average adult male height is only about 5'4.5" or 164 centimeters. On a modern level, this is partly a result of relatively low income and poor access to balanced nutrition and healthcare. However, genetically, the Inuit also show adaptations to their extreme environment, including shorter heights. It's theorized that Inuits and other Arctic populations may have evolved to have shorter limbs to help preserve heat. and on a metabolic level, genetic adaptations may have developed in response to their traditional high-fat, cold-weather diet. Specifically, genetic mutations, which help the body metabolize high levels of omega-3 fatty acids from a nearly exclusive diet of fish and marine mammals, which has the side effect of being linked to shorter height. Lastly, a look at non-dietary lifestyle. This arguably has the lowest effect on height, but undoubtedly has one nonetheless. Physical activities like running, especially high-intensity training, can trigger the release of human growth hormones, which is crucial for bone and muscle growth during an individual's formative years. Weight-bearing exercises also help build stronger, denser bones, which supports overall skeletal development during the years when bones are still growing. Lastly, active lifestyles during adolescence increases cardiovascular function, improving overall health and immunity to disease, which improves an individual's likelihood of achieving their maximum potential height. These factors may have played a role historically in favoring nomadic, non-sedentary cultures when it comes to height, which again tended to be populations in the north compared to more sedentary agrarian cultures of the south. However, the discrepancies between the north and south are debatable, as farming was considered labor-intensive, so it's difficult to quantify what lifestyle was more physically active. Sleep is also a critical factor in a child's height development, because the majority of human growth hormone is released by the pituitary gland during sleep, with the largest and most significant bursts occurring during the first episodes of deep, non-REM sleep, typically shortly after falling asleep. So in reality, no single culture can be definitively said to have the best non-dietary lifestyle for height development, as optimal growth is more a result of the combination of genetics, nutrition, and overall health. But we're throwing this in here just as good food for thought. So there you have it, all the reasons why Northerners are taller than Southerners. What are your thoughts? Do we have any 6'5" Southerners or 5'5" Northerners in here to refute this theory? Thank you again to MyHeritage for sponsoring this video. If you want to find out how your heritage helped shape your height, click the link or scan the QR code to learn more. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It makes a huge difference in allowing me to create more content like this.
About time y'all show some respect around here. Huh? Whoa! Damn! Lee, I got a big problem, man. Ah!